Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co hostess, Anna, and I'm here with.
Do we have an entertaining Hollywood spectacular cast for you today, Anna? What movie are we talking about today?
Well, before we get started, I do have a little reminder. Say it with us now, everyone. I will not accept a life I do not deserve. That's right. If you
You
don't know
do
what we're
that
talking
so well. I was like, I can't even get in there.
I no lie, I say it on the way to work every morning in the car to myself. And I am not ashamed to admit it. I even say it sometimes to my colleagues.
Yeah.
But no, it's a great film. If you haven't guessed already, we're talking about Maxine. Um, before we get into it, there is some body horror, religiosity, violence against men, sexual violence against men. Also, very gory kills, although they are creative. Um, we'll get into that. Sorry. Just thought of my favorite
We're
one.
so excited. There is also I applaud T West for really showing Hollywood in the 80s, the
Mhm.
underbelly of Hollywood in the 80s. So people that are still struggling with sexuality, I feel like T West did a did I
Mhm.
call him Ty West? Sorry. T West really was humanizing
Yeah.
sex workers, which I really appreciated.
Mhm.
And it feels like that could be controversial, sadly, because there are still some people that don't
Mhm.
want to see sex workers in a
Yeah.
positive light. And so throwing that out there, I loved that he really humanized a part
Mhm.
of our society, people in our society that tend to be really looked down upon, judged. And he was basically like, these are people and they
Yeah.
have lives and they have goals and they have
Mhm.
dreams and they don't deserve to be dehumanized
Right.
or overly sexualized. Like there's a
Mhm.
like even with Maxine where men are like, oh yeah, I know who you are, and just that like pigeonholing that
Mhm.
creepiness that
Yeah.
she is trying in this film to really break out of and be like, you
Mhm.
can't. I think women in general, would you agree, just jumping right into it? Because even the female director is really like, to make it in this industry, this is how it has to be. Like, this is
Mhm.
a man's world, and
Oh yeah.
you have to like show up this way.
Absolutely. And I think that just Margaret and I are both cisgender female. So, we are we are children of the 80s and 90s here, bringing it to you. So we grew up very much with these visuals of career girls and what you have to be and the standards you have to uphold and how to survive in a cisgender white male dominated world. And you really see a lot of that, as Margaret said in the film. Even when Maxine is talking about why she wants the role in The Puritan too, when she says, well, I'm almost 33 years old, that makes me stale as a piece of bread in the porn industry. And after they're done talking, the panel replies by saying, okay, great, now show us your tits. Right
Yes.
there. I mean, it's pretty much what it comes down to.
The dehumanizing of women in
Mhm.
film. And Anna and I discussed this a little bit earlier, how T West really, he is one of a few male film creators that gets the female experience, wants to show the
Mhm.
female experience, because historically, and I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, women in film are generally sexualized and used to promote the plot of the male driven character. Horror is one of
Mhm.
those genres that actually, I think 43% of protagonists in horror films are female, I
Yeah.
believe, compared to like maybe 10% or
Mhm.
something in just film in general. And so I feel like this is one of those films that is saying, look, no, like this is an issue. Women aren't just here to be sexualized or to
Mhm.
further. somebody else's story. Even her
Absolutely.
dad treated her that way.
Yeah.
Spoilers jumping in. Her
Mhm.
dad was using her to further his career.
Yeah. She was like a conduit to his success. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of pressure for a child. I mean, even when you look at like child stars in the mainstream, not in the evangelical world, although I'm sure there's like a whole fan base there too, right? Because like we're talking about horror, we're thanatologists, we have our own niche here that we're in. And if you think about it in a broader perspective, like pretty much anything and everything that you can think of in your mind and beyond, there is a niche market for. Um, so, with that being said, that's a lot of pressure. And I think that we don't learn this really so far, but I did hear there's going to be a fourth one, and I'm ready. Like, whenever that comes out, I'll be there first in line, eating popcorn, drinking, well, bottled water because I'm boring. No Slurpees for me. But I'm very excited. I think it would be great to know a little bit of the backstory because I would assume there's some sort of religious abuse, childhood trauma, items of that nature that caused Maxine to leave in the first place. And, I do agree so much with you, Margaret, that the way that sex workers are portrayed are as people in this film, right? And I think about there was a movie in the 90s that came out, and I can remember being a little girl, like elementary age, and seeing this and just being fascinated. It was called Girl Six. I don't know if you ever saw it, but our protagonist, so she was an aspiring actress and she takes a job as a phone sex operator. But like she and her colleagues, like they talk about their lives outside of work. You see their lives outside of work. And so it really kind of broadened my perspectives as a kid to be like, okay, well, I mean, it's just a job. Like that's why they call it work, sex work, because it's work. Um, you know what I mean? So it's a
It's
job.
just a job, yeah.
Yeah, and
And a job that needs to be fulfilled. I mean,
mhm.
don't they call it like the oldest profession in the
Yeah,
world? There's a reason that
yeah,
they
and I
call it
mean, it's really, not to go into my business background too much, but supply and demand. If there weren't demand for it, it wouldn't be in such supply and availability. So, I mean, let's be realistic here. Like, it's part of the supply chain, anywhere you want to slice it. Pun intended. Boom, boom.
So
Um,
I'm curious. I
yeah.
have a question for you. So we've both talked about hagsploitation. The
Mhm.
beginning quote of the film, Betty Davis quote, I believe it's something
Yes.
like, "In order to make it in this industry, you must be seen as a monster." And song, Betty Davis eyes. So we know there's
Mhm.
like this huge shout out to Betty Davis.
Yeah.
What do you make of that in the context of
Oh,
this film or just Betty Davis in general?
I,
And we talk about sex work in Maxine,
yeah. So
aging out
it's,
of her work and then moving into maybe exploitation.
yeah. So it's actually kind of funny that you asked that. People joke like visually, Betty Davis and I kind of similar, and I love Betty Davis. All About Eve is one of my favorite movies ever. Um, I think that ironically, she also had another famous quote that I'll make it a little more PG, but between she and Joan Crawford, I play the villain, but I'm actually kind. She plays the kind woman, and she's actually the villain. So I think just the way that people prostrate themselves, it's really interesting. I think that what Betty Davis may have meant by that monstrous quote that's pretty, prominent in the beginning of the film is that it gets to the point where they're all talking about you and that's what you want, right? Any publicity is good publicity. You've gotten to a level where you can demand things and you're not shunned or thrown off into something else. Like you are able to ascend to this and you've earned it, but you've had to fight for it. And I think at the time too, like think about it, the 30s, 40s, maybe even 1950s, a woman who's like, and I hate using this phrase, but clawing her way to the top, um, breaking the glass ceiling, getting out of the pink collared ghetto, whatever you want to call it, had to be really tough. And at that time, like a tough woman was seen as a threat. Um, once again, my opinion might be a little bit biased because I do love Betty Davis so much. I also love Joan Crawford, which is kind of funny because they were not besties by any means. I don't know. What do you think?
I just thought it was really interesting as this is, and we were talking about this film before, really
Mm-hmm.
touched on how this is really becoming a feminist
Mm-hmm.
film, and just everybody's, especially women,
Yeah.
are loving this film because it's
Mm-hmm.
touching on so many female issues.
Yeah.
And for our viewer listeners, high exploitation, for those that don't know, it is, again, women aging out of the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And so they give them this title that when they're old and they're in movies, it's high exploitation,
Mm-hmm.
because forbid that older women actually have leading roles. And I think, what is like the average age? I think for like a lead role in Hollywood, it's like 20s. Like,
Yeah.
I think once you hit your 30s,
That's
you're
kind of
considered
it. Yeah.
old. I was looking up high exploitation films for something else because I was curious. Toni Collette in Hereditary, that was considered a high exploitation film. And I was like, she's like, what, 40s in that film?
Yeah.
So, like, this, I just felt like it was really touching on
Mm-hmm.
how women were
Yeah.
trying. Look at the beginning of the film. Cute little Maxine
Mm-hmm.
saying her line, because women have to be cute. They have to be
Yeah.
pretty. And as soon as they get to a certain age, they're old, they're washed
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah.
Not to get into politics, but yet we have two men, what, in their 80s, that are trying to be president of the United States, but a woman in her 80s, oh my gosh, she
Who
might as
should
well
be
be in
home
the
baking
nursing home.
cookies for her
Yeah.
grandkid. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yes.
it is, there is still definitely such a standard. And, um, the thing is too, you bring up like she's this cutesy, adorable little kid, and then we see Maxine now, and she looks like somebody you don't really want to mess with too much, even if you don't know the backstory. And I really want to bring this up too is, you mentioned like how many female identifying people are connecting with this movie. For, I would venture to say for us, this is our Joker. She is our Arthur Fleck. Anyone who was like male identifying and connecting with Arthur, it's the same effect, right? So because we see what Maxine's going through, we see the decisions she's having to make. I think a lot of the previews, and we talked about this in our prediction episode a little bit, almost made her an antagonist, but she's not. She's our protagonist. She killed Pearl because she had to. It was self-defense, cut and clear, life or death. And she's still trying to achieve these things and move on with her life. And that's a whole other thing too. Like the trauma and grief that she experienced in the movie X, she still has not worked through any of that. She's carrying that inside of her. And you can tell it's ripping her apart and impacting her. And I think that it's very unspoken throughout the majority of the film, except I feel like it gets,
I think they did an excellent
yeah.
job touching on her trauma and really bringing her trauma to the forefront. Tell me more about why you feel like it's.
So I feel like, okay, so if you've not seen X and you haven't seen Pearl, it's like, oh, okay, she's going through something, but you don't know the extent of it. So I think that's what I mean. Like, she's keeping it under wraps because she doesn't want, just like she doesn't want her colleagues to find out, like the viewer can't find all these things out in the third installment. Like, you have to be subscribing to the films. So I think for me, that was really smart. I was really, really, really sad when her friend that worked at the video store, what was it? I think he was called Lawrence.
I don't remember his.
But when he got it, I was like, no, that's her bestie. But I will say that Kevin Bacon's character, I think that they did an excellent job in creating that character as someone who triggers her.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yes, and even in
yeah.
talking about triggering and how you're like, like there's this undercurrent. I feel like they did an excellent job because people know she has trauma. The director's like, I don't know what is distracting you. Take
Mm-hmm.
care of it. So I feel like that mirrors life when we've had a
Yeah.
trauma and like everybody thinks I'm normal. I'm so good. And people are like,
Mm-hmm.
what is wrong with you? Like
Yeah.
you are not okay. Even when they put the prosthetic on her face and she falls over in the
Mm-hmm.
chair and we see it like a flashback. I was like, yes, because we have stuff going on in our head and we're like,
Yeah.
I'm fine. And some people are like, okay, cool, you're fine. And other people are like, you're
Yeah.
not okay. And you need to figure out what's wrong. And I also agree with you. I was really sad when her bestie died. I really
Yeah.
liked that character. And
Me
Kevin
too.
Bacon was an awesome
Yeah.
villain too. And I love what she did to him too.
Oh yeah, like the cast in general was great. And I have to say, like, when the detective was giving her a hard time and she disclosed it to her agent slash lawyer, Teddy, problem solved. I was like, he's a great agent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
keep him because he's awesome. you know, and I know that sounds kind of wild to think that way, but I, to me, it was really comforting to know that she actually did have people around her who cared about her and wanted to protect her. Because she's so used to that not happening that it was really nice to see. And also, I don't know if you spotted this, but the guy that ran the landing strip, um, so he actually plays Young Rock in Dwayne Johnson's show.
Oh,
I
I
was
did not
like,
catch that.
I was so excited. But I think that he did a great job. Everybody, the cast in general was just excellent. I mean, great choices, great acting, absolutely delightful. Of course, I loved it, exceeded my expectations. Um, I adore Maxine. I think that she's wonderful. I think she's tough. She's got a lot of grit. You kind of have to. And I think it that's the thing too. And once again, back to the whole fans identifying with her. Um, life can be really tough, and you got to figure out a way to be tougher. But you also have to figure out a way to take care of yourself, and those are two really fine lines to try and walk at the same time.
Yes, and I feel like you really touch on that the movie is looking at that and even allowing her to take the lead. Like when her agent's like, I got you, he lets her determine her role in it when they're taking care of Kevin Bacon. And I I love when she confronts him. Like when
Yeah,
she just breaks his nose. I was like, how many times as women
mm-hmm.
has there been some creepy guy that we just want to
Just bust him in the
be
face.
like, yeah, like
Yeah.
leave me alone. You don't have a right. And
Mm-hmm.
even Kevin Bacon's male entitlement that's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I get to do this to you. It's my job and I'm a guy, so and
Yeah.
so I feel like you were saying, like Maxine's really saying we're not gonna you don't get
Mm-hmm.
to violate my consent. I didn't give you consent to film me, to follow me, to do
Mm-hmm.
any of this to me, so
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
going to say something to you.
Yeah, and even on top of that, like the scene where she's walking home from work, she's by herself. The guy dressed as a Charlie Chaplin gets all weird and creepy after her, and anyone who's seen it, you know, the big scene, I guess. Um, it kind of was almost like retributive in a sense because it is very scary, especially late at night going down an alley by yourself. And I love the fact that she's acting as though she's going to climb this fence and like escape, and she's all scared. And then she turns around and she takes a gun out of her purse. I'm like, okay, really? You got the wrong one. And having, which I'm not going to give all of it away, but having this guy who's trying to accost her with a switchblade strip, get down on the ground, and then basically perform an oral sex act on this gun. Yeah, it is scary. It is degrading. But guess how often it happens the other way around.
Yes, that was like a very satisfying scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then did you catch later in the film, I think there's like a news report that's like, this man was accosted and they're still looking for like female perpetrator. And I was
mm-hmm.
thinking, how often are women accosted?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make the news, and they're not still looking for the perpetrator, but here this poor guy who was probably going to rape and murder her, if nothing else, rape her.
Yep.
He gets harmed, he gets assaulted. So now it's newsworthy when millions of women every year it happens.
Right. And the other thing too is if something would have happened to her and he had done it, even if it made the news, it would have been like, oh, well, she's a sex worker.
Mm-hmm. So it would have been minimized.
Too late. She was wearing a dress that was too short. You know, whatever it was, there would have been some causation to why it happened to her if it were opposite. You know, and I enjoyed that she is taking care of herself and standing in the face of fear and like laughing, like, that's all you're gonna give me? Obviously you have no idea like who you're messing with.
Yes. What did you make of them bringing elements of Psycho into
I thought it was adorable.
The movie?
What about you?
I was just curious. I was like, oh, this is
Yeah, I got a good laugh out of it because a dear friend of mine who I've told you about, we've known each other since high school, so since adolescence. They are convinced that I am a psycho because I love Maxine and Pearl and Axe. So it made me laugh quite a bit because I was like, psycho. But no, I thought it was great. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was kind of nice to spot that on the film lot as well. You know, it's interesting too, because if you think about it, Norman and his mom and their relationship, so there's a lot of speaking to parental relationships and dysfunction.
Ooh, yes, parental relationships, dysfunction, and again, aging, because it is Norman's mom. We have Pearl, who aged out. So this, again, how do women deal with aging? Like, what does that look like in our current society, and how it can be such a source of anxiety? And as then thanatologists, we can also look at those life losses for women who, like, it seems like men, oh, he's getting gray, he's aging, whereas women, it's like, are you going to get Botox? What about this? What about that? So there's not that aging.
You're not gracefully turning into a butterfly. You know, you got to stay a caterpillar if you're a woman. You know, and it's just, there is a lot of societal pressure, and I know we're talking about like old stars a little bit, but I recently actually saw a reel with Elizabeth Taylor on it, and the host asked her, and she was probably maybe in her 60s at the time, and said that, you know, you've had some physical setbacks. Is it difficult for you, having once been one of the most beautiful women of the world, or something like that? And she just looked at him and was like, what's beauty except for something that changes over time?
I love that. What a beautiful way to put somebody in their place, so to speak. It's kind of like, okay, your idea of beauty is that I once was, and for her, it's that beauty is ever changing.
Yeah, and it's funny because as a kid, I always was like, wow, that's that lady with all the cool clothes that's friends with Michael Jackson and helps people that are sick. Because, you know, when I grew up, that's what she was doing. I had never realized that at one point she was young and a beautiful, successful actress or whatever until I had grown up and seen her in an old movie. So it really, it's interesting. Like you said, the perception of beauty and what it actually means and entails. Yeah, I do think that, you know, there's a lot going on in Maxine too. And the other thing that I want to mention is she's not doing bad for herself in what she's doing before she even gets the role in The Puritan, because the movie takes place in 1985 and she's driving a new 1985 Mercedes I think it's an SL 380 convertible. So at the time, that was a pretty hot car.
She's working like
Yeah.
multiple jobs. She does porn
Hmm.
during the day and she dances
Yeah.
at
But
night. So she's
yeah, I mean,
doing
how
a
many
lot
of
of
us
hard
have done
work.
that though? Like, you really, really want something, so you're working like a full-time job and a part-time job, or, you know, you have your side hustle or whatever. And, you know, that's what's so likable about her too. She's like, I want this, I'm going to figure out a way to get it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And there's no like foul play. Like, a few people had said like they were waiting for like a Crystal Nomi moment, like Showgirls, you know, for her to get the
Mm-hmm.
part, but that doesn't happen. You know, she earns it. She works for it. She gets it, you know?
Yes. And like, I feel like too, the director sees a lot of herself in
Mm-hmm.
Maxine, and that's one reason because there's even that part where she's driving Maxine around the sound lot, and she's like, "The producers did not want you. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
had to fight for you. Basically, like, don't make my hard work not pay off. I'm like gone out on a
Mm-hmm.
limb for you."
Yeah. And actually, how many times have any of us had a boss that have told us something to that effect? Of like, I've gone to bat for you, and that makes you want to work harder for them. So it's actually, I don't want to say really good psychology, because it's also a great way to burn out your employees, but um, it's funny to see that that sort of verbal communication and motivate, quote unquote, motivation 40 years later is still pretty abundant in the working world.
Yes. And I love how you take that, like, this does make Maxine want to get it together. I think you touch on something when we have a shared goal. If somebody says, I went to bat for you, I put my neck out for you, we do want to work harder because we have a shared goal. It can
Mm-hmm.
also feel manipulative when we
Yes.
speak about employees or employers, if they're like, I went to bat for you, when we're already not invested in the work goal, or
Mm-hmm.
we didn't ask of that. We didn't want that person to go to bat for us because we are unhappy at work. And so, listeners, you get to look at in your life, where does that feel empowering? Like, yeah, I have this shared goal and this feels really good. I want to work harder, as to where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, why'd you go to bat for me? I didn't
Yeah.
want you to do that. Maybe I'm self sabotaging. Maybe I hate my job and I show up late every day because
Mm-hmm.
I hate it here. And then the boss is like, I went to bat for you. I didn't write you up. So start showing up on time. It's like, you're not
Yeah.
addressing my core issue
Right.
with work. So it can be so, I think Maxine kind of touches a lot on these little nuances where they can feel
Mm-hmm.
either empowering or it can feel manipulative.
Mm-hmm. And that really personifies the workplace experience in some ways. I think it's a really great kind of visual art displaying these things. And I think that there are also like these different characters that we see throughout the film that we identify as like, okay, well, you know, this person has her back no matter what. And, you know, we've talked about a few of them already. It's really great to see that. And then there are like ones that like, oh, probably should watch out for that one. Like when Lily Collins' character is talking to Maxine and then she's like, oh, yes, gals have to stick together. Bye, Nadine. I'm like, mm, mm, got her number. So it's just funny because it's like, how many times do we encounter personalities like that? And it's just a fun catch. But I think, you know, the kills in the movie were great too, and really creative, really just gruesome and fun. And um, I've got to ask you, which kill was your favorite?
That's a great question. I am not sure. I was a little disappointed with the dad
Mm-hmm.
kill. Probably Kevin Bacon's character was the
Yeah.
most satisfying
Mm-hmm.
kill, because like you, I didn't want Lawrence to die. I really liked him. I thought he was just such a fabulous character, and it makes sense for the
Yeah.
plot why he had to die. How about
Mm-hmm.
you? What was your
Yeah, I'm also I really enjoyed the detective getting smashed. And I enjoyed that the Dobermans helped clean up the mess, because it reminded me, okay, I would just say remind me of my dog. Not that she does those sorts of things, but they're beautiful. And I was like, oh, they're beautiful, even though they're eating Kevin Bacon's remains. But I thought it was really creative too. And it just reminded me of other horror movies that I loved, like so many countless references to other horror movie genres, like The Junkyard, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child immediately comes to mind. Kincaid and his dog Jason in The Junkyard, right? The movie Christine, that's another one, the smashy smashy. I mean, there are so many references to 80s and even 70s slasher films throughout the entire movie, which is just, I I love it. Love it. Love it. Did any like particularly stand out to you?
No, I feel like I was just enjoying, like, I feel like there are films that you can tell the creator just
Mhm.
really loves
Yes.
what they're doing. And it felt like T West just
Mhm.
really respected and loved the 80s and really just
Mhm.
wanted to like put all this in there. It's like when we geek out or we nerd
Yeah.
out and we're like, oh my gosh, and this and this and this and this because it feels good. So I just,
Mhm.
I loved that he just had that
Yes.
in there. That, and we've talked about like being
Mhm.
children of the 80s and 90s that we're like, ooh, that feels real. That
Yeah.
feels relatable. Then when you watch one and you're like, you're missing
Mhm.
the mark, and even if you love it, you're kind of like, you didn't quite get
Yeah.
like what it is. I just love the texture, I guess, is what I'm
Mhm.
trying to say.
Oh, absolutely. Well, okay, here's one more, but everyone will have to look for all the other Easter eggs. Um, the end scene, Friday the 13th, part two,
Yes,
Mrs.
i
Voorhees. I
I
was like,
loved
yep.
that. Was great, even though I'm guessing you're gonna feel differently. I
Mhm.
felt like the end of the movie could have ended like three times. It was almost like I was like, "That's the end." Of like, "Oh, but wait,
Mhm.
we got to let you know this." I'm like, "Okay, that's the." Oh,
Yeah.
but wait, we got. And I appreciate while they did that. I'm like,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I don't know. Just I feel like maybe it disrupted the flow of the movie. I don't know how
Mhm.
you feel because I feel like there was this flow, and then maybe like the last three or four scenes just felt like they
Yeah.
could have been like I don't know. I was just like that
Mhm.
just it jarred me a little bit. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I feel like I appreciate the reference in the end scene because immediately I was like Pam Voorhees and I started
Mhm.
laughing. But I think I'm with you. A nice end to me would have been like after she sniffs the coke and she's looks in the mirror and she's like, "You're a fucking movie star." That would have been a great end too. Um, Knowing now, I've read in several outlets that there is going to be a fourth. So I think that when she was looking in the mirror, that would have been the perfect end. But at the time, they may not have signed like another installment. So there were probably a lot of factors, but it did kind of seem like, oh, okay, well, this is going on. Okay, and um, it was, I liked the reference to Pam Voorhees. That is probably why I like the ending so much, but it did seem like it kind of went on a bit more. But really, when you think about it, Pearl does that. The smile scene at the end, it's like 7 minutes long or something. And you're like waiting for the end roll, waiting, waiting, waiting. And I actually sat and waited until the end roll finished at Maxine because I'm like, oh, is there going to be something else? But no, there wasn't. Just me enjoying the
I
soundtrack.
appreciate that take. Like that if they weren't going to do a fourth, then
Mhm.
it's almost like when your favorite show finds
Oh,
out it's
yeah.
not going to be renewed for like another season, and so they're trying to like wrap up all the storylines. So that makes complete sense. If they weren't at the time
Mhm.
planning on doing a fourth, then it's like, let us wrap up Maxine.
Mhm.
Let us give you a satisfying conclusion
Yes.
to it. And you've shared before that end roll in Pearl where she's actually crying because she's
Mhm.
smiling that whole time. And
Mhm. She's waiting for
Yes.
CDL cut. Like, yeah. And that's one other thing that we haven't talked about yet from the film, which I think could have its own episode of attention. The soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
It was perfect. Like, beginning to end, everything was exactly as it should be. Loved it. Love, love, love. Absolutely all the things. Maybe it's because my parents listened to a lot of that music when I was a kid. I don't know. But it was a delight for me. What about
It
you?
was, I'd agree. I feel like the attention to detail, and maybe because we both watch his films and we are familiar with his films, whereas with like other directors, maybe so much, I feel like we have watched him grow into his career. I really recently watched, what is it, Sacrament, which is a found footage film that he did. And he's still young and it's still a good film. But then we watch Maxine and I'm like, I can see how you have just developed, and that can be really exciting to see somebody develop and all their talents come together, where he loves the story he's telling and he loves the era that he's telling it in and how he's just putting all these pieces together. I felt that out of the three, and I don't know about you, I felt this movie came together the best, that it really just, it gelled in a way that I don't feel that. I feel like X did more, and I felt like Pearl didn't, but that was also filmed during the pandemic. So I'm wondering how that impacted how that film came together.
Right. And I think too, like for me, it's like the whole series, it's very visceral. And I think like with Pearl, it's like, okay, well, a lot of the things that are going on, a lot of the things that we're hearing, like, I heard a lot of those sayings and things in my childhood. And, the older generations, like my parents' generations, my grandparents' generations, it was like, if you didn't get off the farm, you would be on the farm. And so to me, it was very real in that sense because I'm, familiar with that. And once again, West does an amazing job portraying that. But I think you're right. As you look at the films, and all of them, I think, are very salient. They have a lot to say. There's a lot going on, but each one is done slightly differently. And you're kind of coasting along, and then you're, enjoying the sail. And it's really great to see how it's progressed as we've gotten to each one.
Yes, I love how you bring that up and reflect that as well. And even as you're talking, I was thinking, as we've been talking about Wes really taking this feminist standpoint, Sacrament shows early him where the female characters are just there to serve the purpose of the male driven plot. And so then, even when I was watching, I'm like, who are the influences in his life? Where did he, and I'm guessing Mia, because she's executive producer, she's very involved. And then I also think, I wonder, is it his wife? Like, I just really appreciate when people, and we talked on this on another cast, where people can become focused and they, as creators, don't let any outside information in. I feel like West is a creator that, even though he wrote and directed it, he's allowing outside influences to say, that is not going to work. Why don't you try this? Why don't you? I think George Lucas, his first Star Wars was completely different. I think it was his first, and his wife was like, no. And then she helped him to recreate it so that it was the film that it was. So I appreciate when creators are able to allow other people's opinions to.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with like constructive criticism. I mean, that's part, I think, too, from like the thanatological grief, loss, change perspective, getting to a point where you are open to receiving and accepting constructive criticism helps you in your personal growth journey. And throughout any journey you might be going through. Now, this is constructive criticism. This is not consistent criticism, and there is a huge difference. That's someone saying, oh, well, I really like this idea, but what if maybe you added this or change that around a little bit? That's constructive. Someone saying, why do you even bring your ideas to these meetings? No one cares. That's consistent criticism. So it's very important to identify and know the difference. And also, if you are receiving consistent criticism anywhere in your life, so whether it be at work, at home, friends, family, colleagues, strangers on the street, their comments have everything to do with them and nothing to do with you.
Oh, thank you for sharing and helping our listener viewers with determining the difference and also not to personalize when somebody is criticizing them because it is them. And even in my work, when I talk with people about how do we share, Anna, if you notice, she said, and also. And also is a very powerful way when I say, I really love your idea. And have you thought of feels better than if I say, I love your idea, but
Mm-hmm.
but can be a very negative word that oftentimes pretty much is saying, I really didn't love your idea. I'm just saying that so I can get to my point. Then if I
Mm-hmm.
use and also, those are two very powerful words when we are communicating with people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think that it's not what you say, but how you say it. It doesn't only have to do with the inflection of what's being said, it's actually, as you mentioned, the verbiage being used. That's incredibly important. And I think sometimes if we ask ourselves, how would I feel if someone said this to me in a specific sort of way, preempts how we're communicating with another person. Right? Because if I don't want you to say it to me, why should I say it to you in that way?
And how do you use respect? And hopefully, listeners, when you listen to Anna and me, we disagree plenty of times, but there's this respect and we're able to communicate like, okay, that was your take and that's wonderful. And this is my take. And that can be just as wonderful. It doesn't have to be like Anna was saying, where then it just becomes all about the person that's speaking and they're disregarding their
Absolutely.
audience or the relationship that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have communication moments where we're discussing subject matter in a setting and we do get frustrated and maybe we do storm off or we cut the conversation and we leave. But then it's up to us as individuals to one, say, why did I feel that way? And also, what can I learn from that? How can I grow from it and be considerate of the information that was shared to me, right? Because sometimes we're hearing what someone else is saying, but we're reacting because we don't agree with it. We don't believe that. We don't subscribe to that ideology. And that can be very difficult to kind of sit and listen to those sorts of things. And, it's up to us as individuals to find out a really healthy, productive way not to react negatively and also to use that as part of our own growth and how to apply it towards ourselves in doing so.
And I love that you highlight that for our listeners and viewers. And even I just want to validate that we are human. We react negatively. And as Anna's saying, how do we do that inner awareness? And then how can we even come back and say, I really reacted negatively. I was triggered. I was activated. I apologize for my response and offering repair. So often we just go, well, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm sorry I yelled at you. You were talking about something and that really triggered me and I just needed to shut you down. I will do better about knowing my triggers and communicating that is how we build healthy relationships because we're going to be triggered, we're activated, we are going to react negatively. We are human and sometimes we know those activations so we can get ahead of them. And sometimes we don't. We have our protectors that they're like, oh, we're under danger. Let's stop this.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be challenging. Like I know for me, sarcasm is my favorite brand of humor, but it's also my defense mechanism. So so that can kind of get me into trouble. And I think sometimes for those around us, it makes it difficult, like, is this person being funny or are they actually upset with me? And, how do you tell? And, so there are things that we have to kind of keep in mind as well. Um, I, yeah, I mean, that's the big meme that was going around a while ago was, oh, you're so funny. And then the other person's like, thanks, it's trauma, and, um, hey, maybe the next installment, Maxine will have a career in comedy. I don't know. It'll be fun to see what happens. But yeah, I mean, would you say that, like, do you have kind of this ability where sometimes behaviors are mirroring of one another, but they mean completely different things? And if so, like, how do you kind of catch yourself? Because for me, it's like I'll say something really sarcastic and I'll be like, oh, haha, just kidding. But if I'm like defense mechanism, I'll say something really sarcastic and then just like exit stage left. Not that I recommend doing those things. They're probably not the most healthy, especially like the defense mechanism, but we're all works in progress here.
Yeah. And I love how you touch on that. Like, it's either sarcastic just to be sarcastic, or it's a defense mechanism. And
Mm-hmm.
just when we know that in ourselves, oh, I was being sarcastic because I'm sarcastic, or ooh, you kind of poked me. And
Mm-hmm.
is this person somebody who is safe enough for me to explore? Sometimes we use sarcasm as a way to let somebody know, I don't trust you. You're not a
Mm-hmm.
safe person to be around, and I'm not invested enough in this relationship
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
honor it. Or if that person is invested, sometimes we can say things like, was that sarcasm,
Yeah.
or did I really upset you? And as the person that's using it
Mm-hmm.
as a defense mechanism, to honor that and be like, no, actually, you upset me. And that's where we can even say, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about it with you.
Yeah.
This is where we get past boundaries. No, you
Absolutely.
upset me. Well, you hurt my feelings. Okay, I still don't want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. I'm letting you know that
Yeah.
I essentially growled at you. My sarcasm was a
Mm-hmm.
growl. So
Yeah, like there it is. And then of
yeah,
course you have like, the people in your life that you have great rapport with that are also sarcastic, and you're essentially alluding to the opposite of how you feel about them all the time. So be like, oh, Margaret, you're so difficult to talk to. But really, we're joking because we love to talk about all sorts of things together. You know what I mean? And then, like, you might shoot back and be like, you're so weird and hard to understand, Anna. But we know that we're speaking this other language. Someone else listening to the conversation would be like, should I call someone, or are you all okay? You know what I mean? And yeah, it just, you're right. It depends on how well you know someone, how you interact, and kind of what that result is.
and that shared language,
Mm-hmm.
even you're talking about sarcasm and grief. So
Mm-hmm.
often when we've lost somebody, then we will make sarcastic, off colored comments about the person, about their death, that
Mm-hmm.
people from the outside will be like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that is so, and that's a way we process grief. And oftentimes you'll hear people say, was that too soon? Or,
Yeah.
ha, just my humor, because we're working through our grief, and whoever our audience is may or may not be in a place to receive that joke. And then people that can, well, they'll just jump in. They'll be like, oh, yeah. And then she would have said this, talking about a
Mm-hmm.
dead person. People are like, ooh. And it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're not in this stage
Yeah,
where we are.
absolutely. And that's a really good point. Yeah, and it's fun. And I think when we look at like Maxine and Lawrence and their friendship and just, how they communicate with each other and just their friendship, that was enjoyable for me. But like, they seem like they probably would have been able to say the craziest things to each other and know what the other person meant, and like it was all fine. And I delighted in that. I enjoyed that a lot.
I think also touched on how Maxine does have these very powerful, supportive relationships with
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence, with her agent, even
Mm-hmm.
her friend that's like, hey, can you walk me to my car? I don't
Oh
feel
yeah.
comfortable. And how Maxine is just accepting
Mm-hmm.
of where her friends are and just like, no, like,
Yeah.
girl, you go ahead, you go to the party in the hills. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to go. And so
Yeah.
I think it does touch on how we have supportive relationships just
Mm-hmm.
because her friend wants to go to the party. Maxine can be cool, you do you, and I'll go ahead and do
Yeah.
me. And her friend's like, cool, you go ahead and do you instead of maybe just come with me, da 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 da, or peer pressure or.
Absolutely. Like you're just very respectful friendships. And the other thing too is, we see Maxine's nurturing side in that too when she walks her friend to the vehicle. And um, then it's kind of great to see that, Teddy, her agent slash lawyer, is nurturing her because he's helping her solve the problem of the detective, amongst other things. Um, but it's nice to see the nurturer being nurtured as well.
Yes, it is. And how they're portraying that in life, you nurture and then you get to be nurtured. How are you
Hmm.
giving? How are you receiving? What are those relationships? And do you feel that they work? Are you giving and receiving in a way that works best for you? Or are you giving too much? Or do you feel like maybe somebody you're receiving too much from somebody
Hmm.
because maybe they've got other stuff going on? So I think Maxine does a wonderful job of showing that balance.
Absolutely, I agree very much. Well, and I've got to ask, of everyone in the movie, who do you most relate to?
I was just going to ask you that. I I want to say Lawrence. I loved him as a character. I feel like he
Mhm.
was a wonderful supporting character. He was just understanding and there. So yeah, I'm gonna say Lawrence. How about you?
It's a toss up. I love Maxine. I really do. I identify with her in some ways, but I also really like Lawrence. I actually have to say the director. Um, because I think that for me, I really try to kind of help people. Although I wouldn't say she and I put ourselves out there in the same way. For me, it's more of, okay, well, hey, I've been down this road before. This is what I had to do. Hopefully, in some way, it helps you. But also to be that person that's like, you got to get this together. You got to get this figured out because it's going to be detrimental to you and those around you if you don't. And I think a lot of the time people are afraid to communicate that to others, but you have to, and you have to do it in the right way. Like, I would never hope at this point in my life, being the person I am, having learned what I've learned, that I would ever be like, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? It's got to be like, you're going through a lot. What can I do to help you figure it out? And just like letting someone know that there are solutions, that you have their back, that someone is there in one shape or form or sense of another is really important.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, of
I
course, predictions for the final film. Do you have any? Is there anything that you'd like to see? Is there anything that you'd like to have eliminated?
I'm open. I'm curious. I really am curious to see where they take the fourth one. What about you?
So I have a lot of ideas at this point, right? So I'm thinking like her dad's dead. She's probably next of kin. He was a televangelist, so he's got all those people's money somewhere. So what's she gonna do with that? Um, Also, like, I don't know why, but I feel like she's gonna end up buying Pearl and Howard's farm because in X, Pearl's like, "You're gonna end up just like me. You'll see." Hmm. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting, but it could take like a whole other turn, and that doesn't happen. And she breaks this like cycle, almost like relationship to like generational cycles. But I mean, they're of no relation, but still, I think that that could really be a great thing. I don't know. I know it's going to be great because all of them have been awesome. I'm excited. I can't wait. Yeah. I mean, we all know how I feel. And if you don't by now, let me introduce you. I'm Maxine Fanatic. And I think part of it too is like these movies have almost created a movement. And, the whole phrase in the beginning of the podcast, I will not accept a life I do not deserve. That's right, man. Like, if you're listening to this, you don't have to accept it. If you're going through some sort of grief, loss, change, life experience, or you're just tired of the everyday mundane stuff that you're doing, you don't have to accept it. You control your destiny. You control if you seek support and services that are there to help you. You control these things and you can do it. You can change things if you want to. Change is scary. Like, it can be very frightening. And you know what? You get through it and you look back and you're like, I don't even know how I did that, but I'm here now. And this is what's going on. And empower yourself. Like, you can do this. And really, I mean, I know for me, when I left the career that I had and was like, okay, I'm a full-time grad student now, I was doing a bunch of business organizational development type things. And then I was like, you know what? On a lark, I'm going to apply to the thanatology program at this other university too and see what happens. And I got in. I was super nervous, especially because it was all virtual. Didn't know any of my classmates, were all over the United States. Had no idea what I was getting myself into. I would say we shared more intimate information about ourselves in some of those courses than we've probably shared with like our closest friends or family members. But you know what? It was worth it. Yeah. Hell yeah, it was scary at times. It was unnerving. There were some times that were like deliriously full of happiness, and it was all worth it. What do you think, Margaret?
Yeah, I agree with you. Thanatology program, well worth it. And I just also, if you're listening, watching, and you are accepting a life that you feel that you deserve because of trauma or low self-esteem or self-worth, really start to question, you deserve more. So often we will accept and say, well, I deserve to be in an abusive relationship. I deserve this low paying job. Start to question, why do you deserve things that aren't serving you? Mm-hmm. Nobody deserves to be in an abusive relationship. Nobody deserves to be mistreated at work. So if you're accepting mistreatment any place in your life, I really encourage you to seek counseling, to seek support, because you don't deserve that. You deserve respect. You deserve unconditional love.
Absolutely. And this is going to sound so silly, but something that has been very helpful to me is if you are in a situation where you feel like you deserve more or you need to change or whatever it is, look yourself in the mirror and talk to yourself about it. I would get very frustrated in grad school if I didn't get an A++ on an assignment, because I do struggle with perfectionism, but or if I was having difficulty finding materials I needed, whatever it was. And one day I was just so frustrated, and I went into the bathroom, I looked in the mirror, and I was like, you got into grad school. That's the toughest part. You're here. You've already done part of the work. Just keep working. And it sounds so funny, but it helps, and if you are in a situation that is not working for you, look yourself in the mirror and say, you deserve more. Like, and when you're looking in the mirror, tell that person, like, hey, I love you. And when you say it, I really hope that you mean it. If you're not able to mean it right now, I hope that you're able to progress and things change for the positive for you, and that you are able to tell your reflection, like, hey, I love you, and that you mean it and it's heartfelt.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just going to add one thing onto that. If you cannot look yourself into the mirror, I want you to find the cutest picture of you, where you are the most adorablest, whatever. When you see this picture, you're like, oh my God, look at how cute I am. And you talk to that version of you.
Mhm.
You tell her, you deserve, you are worthy. I love you. Because so often we might not be able to do it to our current selves, but then when we see our
Mhm.
little selves, so full of hope, so full of life. And even if you can't do that, again, seek support so somebody can help you.
Mhm.
So you can look yourself in the mirror. You can look cute little you in the mirror and be like, girl, you got this. I love you. You're worthy. You deserve.
Exactly. And you know what? This advice is not just for our female identifiers out there, you know, male identifiers,
Everybody,
you deserve
anybody.
this too. Everyone deserves to be happy and healthy and in a position where they can take care of their mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health.
Yes, everybody. Doesn't matter. Non binary, two spirit. Everybody's worthy of
Yeah,
unconditional love.
everyone. Yeah. And
Yes.
don't forget that either. Like, it's important.
Yes. So with that, I feel like it's like you're loved. Thank you for listening
Yes.
and watching.
So, if anything, the femme fatalities love you, and Maxine loves you, and you know, we want you to love yourselves. So stay tuned for our next one. We got some super cool stuff coming up. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you've seen Maxine. And until next time, stay creepy.
Bye.